you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC YouTube channel and Facebook feed.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Defence Secretary says the Army is prepared to carry on driving fuel lorries to forecourts for weeks or months if necessary. Ben Wallace also told the Conservative Party conference he thinks there'll soon be a balance between drivers wanting to fill up and deliveries arriving. Earlier, the Prime Minister told LBC the worst of the fuel shortages is over.
This has been overwhelmingly a problem of demand, not supply. Actually, the tanker drivers, the lorry drivers, they've got more than the average week's supply to the pumps for the last few days.
The Home Secretary has confirmed there will be an independent inquiry into the murder of Sarah Everard. Priti Patel made the announcement at the Conservative Party conference earlier after the Prime Minister ruled one out at the weekend. She says it'll look at how Wayne Couzens came to be a police officer and wider policing culture. Members of the Welsh Parliament have been told not to leave after protesters campaigning against COVID passes blocked exits. Earlier, the Senedd agreed to approve certification to come into force from Monday. The LBC Markets report in the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 69 points at 70.80. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.17. LBC weather largely dry with spells of rain lingering in the northeast and eastern England overnight, a low of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lucinda Horsley.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very warm welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question. It is coming up to 2 minutes past 8 on LBC. On our panel tonight, we have Simon Hart. He is the Member of Parliament for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire, but more importantly, I shouldn't say more importantly, should I, Simon? Secretary of State for Wales. And he has some breaking news from Wales, hot off the press. He's going to play the part of LBC reporter in just a second. Theo Usherwood, our political editor, will be joining us a little later. Shabnam Nasimi, regular on the programme from Conservative Friends of Afghanistan. Albie Amankona, who's becoming a regular on the programme. He's from Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. And we'll also be joined later by Ems Barr, from the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. You know the number, 0345 6060 973. The calls come from you. We're looking forward to hearing from you over the course of the next hour. And you can watch our proceedings on Global Player on the LBC YouTube channel and the LBC website at lbc.co.uk and our Facebook feed.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
And the breaking news from the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd, is Simon Hart.
Well, tonight they were voting on whether to agree to vaccine passports. This is the sort of first vote of its kind. It was being done remotely. The vote, I think, was either 29-28 or 28-27. I can't quite remember which it is. But so Labour win the vote. They technically win the vote, but there was a Conservative member who couldn't get the software to work, who wanted to vote against the proposal. And had he been successful in doing that, it would have been a tie, and this motion wouldn't have gone through. So this is, in Senate terms, quite a significant moment, and one where they're going to reflect on the technological capability of this kind of remote voting for quite a while. So it's created a drama rather than resolved a problem.
And in terms of the issue itself, what was your recommendation in that vote?
Well, we've had to be really careful about respecting Welsh Government and Welsh Parliament's, the Sened's right to express a view on these things. I think from our point of view, it is a controversial area, and I think a problem with it was that it's a self-certification proposal. So in fact, even if it gets imposed, all it requires is people to say, yeah, I've been jabbed twice. There's no real...
With no proof?
No. You could just go, you can go queue up for the nightclub and say, I've been jabbed twice, and they'll let you in. And so whether that's good legislation, I have to say I'm not surprised the vote was so tight, because I think a lot of people thought, well, with this as an air of tokenism about it might not actually solve the problem it's designed to resolve.
And as Secretary of State for Wales, you are obviously a member of the UK Cabinet, and yet this is a devolved matter. Do you sometimes have to sort of bite your tongue on these issues a bit?
Oh, yeah, but of course. I mean, we're part of our the relationship we have is we try at any rate to be based on respect, try to respect the devolved Parliament's ability to legislate in these areas. But, where possible, I do think that, public understanding and public compliance is best served by, particularly around COVID, the rules for the UK being for the UK. And once you get differences in, between Gloucestershire and Monmouthshire, or Herefordshire and Worcester, then it gets really complicated and people start getting frustrated and businesses started getting hacked off. It's a UK-wide solution to the COVID problem.
Just very quickly on vaccine passports or certificates, Shabnam, you a fan?
No, not really. My perspective is that as long as you've had the 2 vaccines, I don't believe in documentation. I don't believe in something that puts a control over you in terms of proving something. We live in a free country. We live in one of the world's freest countries, and it's probably why we love Britain and why we're so different from other European countries. So I don't believe in something that will dictate where you can go and where you can't go. So no, I'm opposed to it.
Albie?
Instinctively, no, I don't like the idea of vaccine passports, but if it's the difference between society staying open or other more draconian restrictions coming in, then I think it's something I can probably live with if we absolutely have to do it.
Because you look at this conference where there are thousands of people, you see the odd person wearing a mask, but frankly nobody is really. It's as if nothing has happened, and it would be... I think that the cabinet decided effectively to abandon passports or certificates in the rest of the UK, haven't they, Simon? Which would be a bit hypocritical if they hadn't, given what's going on at this conference right now.
Yeah, I think we've very much moved to a position of trust and recognising the comments which have just been made by my colleagues here, and I think that's absolutely right as we move, albeit slowly, out of the COVID situation, that taking our own personal responsibilities very seriously seems to me to be a perfectly sort of logical step as we move out of the depth of the crisis. And so I don't think there's anything we're doing which contradicts that.
Okay, right, let's go to our first caller. It's Simon in Southampton. Hello, Simon.
Good evening again. Good evening, panel. With what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, with all the contracts, etc., and now with the revelations of the Pandora papers, is the Tory party corrupt? And if the answer is yes, when did that stop mattering to the general public?
Well, the Pandora Papers, I think that this was all covered in the BBC Panorama programme last night. There's a lot of the papers today about a lot of rich people buying influence, or allegedly buying influence in political parties, not just in this country but all over the world. Albie, what's your view on this?
I think that it does seem from the outset a little bit unfair, I think, if you're just an ordinary person looking in at this. But I think what we also have to remember is that there are some people for whom these large sums of money aren't actually that much money, and they're not necessarily donating it to get influence. They're donating it to contribute to a political movement that they fundamentally believe in and want to see furthered in this country and around the world. And if that's the reason why they're doing it, then I have no problem with it. But if they are buying influence, and I haven't seen concrete evidence of that, then I do think that is a problem that needs to be looked at.
Shabnam?
Look, I don't know as much about this issue to comment properly, but I would say that if you are supporting a political party simply because that you share the values and it's what you that you live by, the party's political values is what you live by, I don't think there's any problems in donating for the cause. You've just got to make sure there's a direct link between funding the party and where that and getting something in return. But in my opinion, no, I don't think we shouldn't be assuming that any donations are going towards a political motive.
And of course, when you look at the rules and regulations that govern this in this country, they are relatively stringent, and you can't just donate money to a political party. You could have done 30 years ago, but you can't anymore. It has to be transparent. It all has to be declared to the Electoral Commission, and political parties are fined if they get it wrong. But there are serious allegations being made here, Simon.
Well, I want to just sort of agree again with Albie's comments. The only reason we're having conversations like this, and we have done historically, is because the system requires us to make these donations public, and we have to comply with, as you rightly say, very strict provision. We have to declare them. They are there for public consumption and have been for some time. And I make no bones of the fact, in all of the 4 elections that I've fought in West Wales, I've had people who've been kind enough to support the cause without attaching any conditions.
But no Russian oligarchs.
Well, as long as they are legitimate UK registered voters and they pass the Electoral Commission rules, of course, I have to raise my money, I have to fight these elections. But whether it's 50 quid or 500 quid or 5,000 quid, the one thing I can say with absolute certainty is there has never been a single occasion when I've received a donation and somebody said, oh, by the way, would you mind asking this question or lobbying this minister or whatever it might be. That has absolutely never happened. And I do think that makes it a slightly different arrangement from trade union sponsorship of other parties, if I can put it, which does seem to come at a policy price.
Controversial.
Well,
but I mean, I remember when I was responsible for registering all the donations to David Davis's leadership campaign, and they amounted to, from memory, about £130,000. But it's from lots of different people. I can't remember what the biggest donation was, but it was probably 10 or 20,000. And I remember going through tortuous sort of filling in forms, thinking, oh my God, if I get this wrong, he could. I mean, politicians hate dealing with donors, don't they?
Well, I mean, we love dealing with donors. I think we probably are worried, as you pointed out, we're worried about you might make a mistake, you might slip up, there might be some kind of sort of error along the way which could then come back and haunt you. But I think the rules are pretty clear. We do our very best. Everybody from any party does its very best to make sure that we comply with them and that they are accountable and that they're transparent. So anybody can see, anybody can look up and see what we've got from whom and when. And they can also look in the official record of Parliament, to see, as people sometimes do, to see if we have suddenly popped up in the chamber of the House of Commons, raised questions which might be relevant to the donation you've had. That's quite a difficult situation to be in. And people have been caught out in that, but that's because our system is robust, and it actually, I think, makes sure that is the exception, never the rule.
Do any of you think that there is a case for state funding a political party? So you just get all of this big money out of politics, and it's all funded from the taxpayer. I don't think most Conservatives would think that was a good idea. You're all looking at me fairly askance at the thought, Albie.
No, I don't think that's a good idea personally, but what I would say is that we don't have an American system of party donations either. We've got something which I think works. It's a very transparent system, it's a stringent system. Yes, there are going to be occasions where there is scrutiny, and it's right that there is scrutiny at the moment, but ultimately I think we have a system which works, and we just need to make sure that there are no loopholes and that people are following the rules properly.
I'm going to take it, Shabnam and Simon, that you don't agree with state funding a political party.
No, absolutely not.
But more importantly, I don't think the public does either, because that's taxpayers' money, and that will, I think, cause equal upset.
0345 6060 973 if you'd like to join our conversation and ask our panel a question. We'll move on in just a moment. It's coming up to 8:15.
Albie. Criteria apply. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask our panel a question over the next 45 minutes. We have with us Simon Hart, the Secretary of State for Wales, Shabnam Nasimi, who is from Conservative Friends of Afghanistan, and Albie Amankona, who is from Conservatives Against Racism and for Equality. Anthony in Staines has our next call. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, everyone. Does the panel think they'll see a black, Asian, minority, ethnic Tory leader and Prime Minister in their lifetime?
In your lifetime, right. I think the bigger question is whether it'll be in the next 5 years, because there's quite a few candidates for that post, if you think about it, aren't there? Shabnam, what's your view?
I think with the way the Conservative Party is moving, I'm very, very optimistic that we will have an ethnic minority leader. We have already quite a diverse cabinet, and we've got some of the top 4 offices in the country are led by we've got Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak, and so many others. But no, I'm optimistic, and it's probably why I actually got involved in politics myself. My family originally came from Afghanistan, and I realised that the party is very inclusive, and it's opening its arms to a group that it potentially 20 years ago it didn't. What the party is reflective of today is very different to what it used to be, and it's encouraging.
It's funny because I think back to 2000 to 2005 when I was involved in candidate selections, and I can remember for the 2005 election when Adam Afriyie, a black man, got selected in Windsor of all places, and Priti Patel, in fact I applied for this seat in Braintree in Essex, which is where I come from, and Whittam, and she won that very easily. And you think, well, 2 Essex MPs, Essex may be seen by some people as a bit of a sort of right-wing area. Kemi Badenoch in my home seat of Saffron Walden now. I mean, this, you're right, it would have been unthinkable, I think, 30, 40 years ago, and it shows how far things have come. But we have 2 ethnic minority representatives on our panel. I mean, if it's in a lifetime, I mean, who knows? I may be looking at a future ethnic minority Tory Prime Minister.
Maybe. I mean, just to echo what's just been said, I would go further than saying I'm optimistic. I think it's absolutely, definitely going to happen in my lifetime, and we're going to do it before Labour. You know, we got Margaret Thatcher into power before the Labour Party even had a female leader. They still haven't had one. And I feel really enthusiastic and happy with the diversity that I've seen here at conference. And I've been speaking to a lot of delegates who have been coming here for years, who are saying this is the most diverse conference they've ever been to, Conservative Party conference, and that is amazing.
And the youngest.
And the youngest, exactly. And just speaking to people and talking about the message of my organisation, Conservatives Against Racism for Equality, you know, the amount of buy-in has been incredible. And that, I don't know if that would have happened 10, 20 years ago. And it's happening now. So I think it's definitely going to happen in my lifetime.
Simon, you've been around a bit. I mean, how do you think the parties...
Is that a polite way of saying I'm a lot older than the other guests?
It just means saying that you and I are roughly the same age, I think. How has the party changed to get to a point where it is you've got 2 of the top 4 positions in the cabinet filled by people from ethnic minorities? You've got quite a few others in the cabinet as well. Again, that wouldn't have been possible not that long ago.
I think that, by the way, I agree with the comments which have just been made about the likelihood of this outcome in the next few years, or certainly in our sort of professional lifetimes. I think that is, I wouldn't go as far as saying nailed on, but it really, really feels and looks that way. And I think one of the reasons for that is in a sense it's become for us, you don't find colleagues talking about this in a sort of in a way which is designed to almost contrive a situation. It seems to all of us to be perfectly natural, perfectly normal, perfectly brilliant place to be. And so there's not and so in many ways it has happened in a relatively short space of time, but it just doesn't feel in any way like an unusual or difficult place to be. It's quite the opposite, and I think that's why, you know, we are where we are, and it's going as well as it is.
If you look at the Labour Party, I'm thinking David Lammy, he's in the shadow cabinet. I'm trying to think of other possible leaders from an ethnic minority background in the Labour Party. Sadiq Khan, but he's not an MP at the moment, so I suppose you put him into the equation. But it's quite difficult to think of many others who are right at the top of the party at the moment, isn't it?
I can't think of anyone. And it's people on the left who always talk about representation. But as you've just pointed out, there's hardly any representation of ethnic minorities at the top of the Labour Party where they could potentially come in a position to become a leader. But we've got it in the Conservative Party, so clearly something we're doing is right, and we've just got to carry on doing that.
I think that, sometimes we're described by journalists as a broad church, and I think we are a broad church. I think we, and to some extent we always have been, a much broader church than sometimes people give us credit for.
Well, all political parties have to be broad churches to win, don't they? That's the lesson. If you go back decades, if you're almost like a sect, you're not going to win. Look at the Republican Party in the United States as to what they've become. In a sense, they're more a sort of quasi-religious sect than a political party any longer. Right, let's go to another question. It's a text from Dean in Whitehaven. Iain has taken a bit of stick over the past 24 hours for his views on halal and kosher meat. Is he right? Is it cruel? This comes from a fringe meeting that I chaired with Jacob Rees-Mogg and a few others on Sunday afternoon, where somebody in the audience raised the subject of halal meat. And I said that I felt that it should be banned, and indeed kosher meat should be banned because of the cruelty of the slaughter process, which we've talked about this on the programme before, so I didn't say anything particularly revelatory. And I have had a lot of abuse for this view, whereas I take the view that animal welfare trumps religious freedom. And I don't think that should be a controversial view to hold, and I think it should be, it ought to be something that, to my mind, the mainstream of all religions should believe in as well. But clearly there are issues here. Simon, let's start with you.
I think that most religious representatives that I've spoken to fully accept that there are arguments for pre-stunning, I think the expression is, so that the religious significance of what's going on can be maintained and enhanced and celebrated. But animal welfare, it sounds like a fudge answer, it's really not meant to be, but that animal welfare standards can always...
If it sounds like a fudge answer, it usually is.
I suddenly realised as I was answering that it sounded a bit like that even to me. But that... I honestly, I don't believe anybody, I haven't really come across anybody who's so dogmatic, they're just saying it's got to be like this, that's final. Most people are saying, look, if there's a way we can do this better but also maintain the religious significance, then we should. And if that involves pre-stunning, that's great. I didn't hear your interview, I'm going to have to replay it now.
Well, no, it wasn't an interview, yeah. It was a question from the audience, and I just answered it before I let the panel answer it. Albie.
I don't know enough about the slaughter process in the halal and kosher methods.
Well, they basically really slit the animal's throat.
Yes, of course. I mean, look, killing animals isn't nice, but I think if you eat meat, we have to accept that nasty thing is something which happens. But on the broader point about religious freedoms and, I guess, inclusivity, we live in a very multi-religion country, a multicultural country, and I think it's right that people should be able to practice their religious practices in this country and feel empowered to do so. There might be some sort of conflict with animal rights, but I think if we can introduce pre-stunning, then that's something that we should look at. But I think the way that things are, it's not an argument I've heard that often, to be honest. So I think it's fine for it to happen.
But if you take that argument to its logical extent, then we would allow Sharia law to rule in certain parts of the country. We would look at some other religious practices which we would all probably abhor and say, well, OK, we should allow them because of religious freedom.
I don't think that's a logical extent of my argument at all. I'm talking about this very isolated incident of kosher and halal meat.
It's not an isolated incident. This is happening to hundreds of thousands of animals every day.
This isolated issue then that you have raised, I'm not talking about Sharia law being able to reign supreme on British streets or stoning people for being gay. I wouldn't like that much myself. I'm just saying in this incidence of kosher and halal meat and the way that those animals are slaughtered, obviously it's legal now. So are we saying that we don't agree with the laws that have been put in place by British governments? Is that what you're arguing?
Yes, I am arguing exactly that, because it has been banned in one or two other countries. So there is, I think, Denmark and Austria. I may be wrong on Austria, but it has been banned in Denmark. There's a lot of controversy about it.
Thank you. Well, I actually agree with Albie on this as well. My family's from Muslim heritage, and whilst I'm not particularly practicing, I do know that one of the reasons why a lot of Muslims do settle in the UK is that freedom of expression and freedom to practice their religion the way they want to. And a lot of European countries you can't. I mean, Germany is one example. I've heard countless cases where the way they dress is dictated by the German government and so many other European countries. And as long as it meets regulations that the British government, as Albie mentioned, has introduced, I think it should be fine. We don't live in a society that, like I said, is controlling, and we need to protect those freedoms where people can practice their religion as they see fit. If practices, like you said, go against our values, whether it's you mentioned Sharia law courts, I mean that's against our values here in the UK, so those are unacceptable. But I don't think the same goes for meat.
Right, let's go to Ian in Folkestone. Ian, what would you like to ask?
Oh, hi, good evening.
Hi.
Just to ask the panel, will we ever see a Tory or government minister actually admit that Brexit plays a part in the current issue with shortages in petrol, considering that and also I'd ask the panel, can they name one other country which is using the army to distribute petrol? And secondly, you say the Conservative Party is a broad church. I don't think it is anymore. Unless you believe in Brexit, you're no longer part of that church. Thanks, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Shabnam, I keep giving you the wrong name. I do apologise.
Just a quick reference to the broad church. We had a referendum. We live in a democracy. People chose to leave. Broad church doesn't mean that you suddenly agree to what everyone believes. There's a majority vote, and you have the freedom to declare what it is that you wish in the way that you want Britain to be governed. People chose to leave the EU. It has nothing to do with the notion of broad church, absolutely at all. What was the first question?
Well, do you think that a government minister will ever admit the connection between shortages and Brexit?
I would say that both Brexit...
Well, we are about to find out whether one will.
I'm sure they probably both COVID and Brexit had a factor to play in this. But the shortages, in my opinion, is more down to the fact that we have a population that's ready to panic in any situation, like we had with the toilet paper situation during Corona, rather than rational thinking. Over the last week or so, I haven't found an issue to find petrol. I've been able to navigate through this. It's the panic state of mind that we've got to be able to fix.
I want to know where your petrol station is. Albie.
I mean, look, just looking at the facts of the situation, I think the HGV driver shortage is about 100,000 driver shortage. And I believe that the figure of EU drivers who have left the UK workforce is 9,000. So it's 9% of 100% of a problem. So if a minister, and Simon might say this, wants to say it's 9% of the problem, then they can. But it's 9%. It's a negligible amount. Yes, I'm sure it would be helpful for those 9,000 drivers to be here in Britain. But ultimately, the problem is the 100,000 shortage, and that's what needs to be fixed. And painting it with Brexit and just saying the whole problem is Brexit is not nuanced enough and just incorrect.
Simon?
I would like to think that where there is a sort of direct consequence of something which may be causing hardship, I would be prepared to say, look, yeah, this is a problem. However, just on the question of HGVs, there is a shortage in America, there's a shortage in Japan, there's a shortage in Australia, Poland, Germany.
None of those countries have got the army helping.
But hang on a minute, but none of them left the EU. The accusation is that this is almost a direct byproduct of Brexit. That is clearly not the case. What it clearly is the case is it's been a reaction to some of the impact of COVID. Now, how those countries respond and whether they use military support is a matter for them. I actually think it's a fantastic position. It's a fantastic position for us to be able to rely on, as we so often have through COVID and in other situations, the full might of the MOD to come to the aid of members of the public during a difficult time. I don't think that's something we should be embarrassed or ashamed about. And I think most people are incredibly.
Can you bring yourself to admit, as Albie says, that a proportion, however small, a proportion of the problem is due to Brexit?
No, as far as HGV is concerned, no. Because I think that is wrong. I think that is wrong. However, what I would say, if it reassures you a little bit, is that, of course, there have been, as were predicted, some consequences of Brexit. For example, some of the import-export infrastructure issues. In Wales, we've got Holyhead Port, Fishguard, Pembroke, and these have had their challenges as a result of Brexit. Not only did we know that would be the case, but I think people voted in the certain knowledge that this was going to be quite a significant transition period, compounded by COVID, which people didn't at the time. And so I don't think people were in any sense naive.
Just finally, why won't a cabinet minister actually say the truth? And the truth is that a lot of this industry is a lot of these problems are caused by the failure of the road haulage industry to plan for this over not just years, but decades. They've known that they've had an ageing demographic. They've known that this is going to happen, just as in other countries it's happened. But why haven't they planned for it? Why haven't they increased wages to attract more people, more younger people into the sector? They seem to think that this is a nationalised industry and it's the government's fault.
I think, our government, this government, my party, have always, I hope, been reasonably honest about the fact that we are, we try to not interfere, particularly in the running of the private sector. We've tried to always step out of the way and just create the circumstances in which business can flourish. It's one of the Conservatives' great sort of battle cries. And so I don't want to particularly criticise road haulage industry collectively.
You're going to leave it to me, aren't you?
Well, I mean, I don't think you need much persuading by the sounds of things.
Well, to me, it's as clear as night follows day, but I don't understand why you all sit there and take all the criticism when actually it's the fault of industry anyway.
Well, I don't know. I think the politicians blaming everybody else for everything that goes wrong is never a route to mass.
Everyone else blames you, so I don't see why you shouldn't have a go as well. Listen, we are going to lose Shabnam and Albie for the next half an hour. We are going to welcome Theo Usherwood, our political editor, and Emma Barr from Conservatives, from the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. In fact, she should have been on for one of those questions before, shouldn't she? But there we go. Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll come back to your questions in a moment. It's 8:33, time for the news headlines with Lucinda Horsley.
The London Mayor has welcomed an independent inquiry into the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer. It was announced by the Home Secretary earlier. Priti Patel says she wants to ensure something like it never happens again. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, says the Army is prepared to carry on driving fuel lorries to forecourts for weeks or months if necessary. He's also told the Conservative Party conference there'll soon be an equilibrium between drivers wanting to fill up and deliveries arriving. Members of the Welsh Parliament have been told not to leave after protesters campaigning against COVID passes blocked exits. Earlier, the Senedd agreed to approve certification to come into force from Monday. LBC weather largely dry with spells of rain lingering in the northeast and eastern England overnight, a low of 7 degrees.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:37. We have Simon Hart, the Secretary of State for Wales, still with us. We have Ems Barr, who is from the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation, and our political editor, Theo Usherwood. Let's go to Kerry in Swansea. Hello, Kerry.
Hi.
Hi,
Nice
what would
to
you
meet
like
you.
to ask? Kerry, are you there? What would you like to ask? No, she seems to have disappeared. Well, I don't know what the lines are like to Swansea, Simon. Is that your responsibility?
Probably my fault.
Yep, absolutely. I think we can all agree on that. OK, let's go to David in Chesterfield. David, hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi. With all the talk about the universal credit uplift being scrapped and the number of hours required to make up that £20 difference, regardless of how many hours each people are saying it is going to be required, what do you expect the disabled to do and those assessed as not able to work by the Department of Work and Pensions themselves?
Well, we should explain that Theo and Ems have no responsibility for this whatsoever, but I'm sure they might have a view. Simon, I guess that's aimed at you more.
Yeah, it is, and I think that I don't duck from the fact that this is going to be is a challenge. I think people are worried in some cases, very worried about what the shift which comes into effect actually means for them and their families and their jobs and their prospects. I completely accept that. What we've attempted to do, and we will never get this absolutely spot on. What we've attempted to do is to try and make sure that as the universal credit temporary provision is withdrawn, that other elements of the economy which are growing quite well are there to take up some of that slack and in some cases improve people's prospects, whether they're in work or not in work. And of course for those, and maybe this is at the heart of this question, for those who fall outside those potential opportunities which an improving economy provide, there are hardship funds, and I put that in a sort of broadest collective sort of expression I can find. Hardship funds which people will be able to access and I hope will be able to plug the gap if there is a gap, or support them to the same level or as near as possible the same level as they've been supported before. You know, we are really keen, as I hope we've demonstrated during COVID, to make sure that we help and catch as many people as we can. I know we won't get everybody, I know that, but the ambition is to look after as many people.
There are a lot of people who hear the word hardship fund and they're too proud to apply for things from a hardship fund.
Maybe there's a better expression that I could use, and I seriously, I've got in my own constituency plenty of people who I've been speaking to who are in very similar situations, and you're right, this is it's a big deal. It is a big, big deal. And we try and want to make Therese Coffey, who I think has been really, really good at trying to make the difficult situation as navigable and as palatable as possible. I can only say that where there are individuals who fall outside all of the things we will try and do, please, get in touch with, your MP, your Citizens Advice, whoever you can, because there will be ways in which we can help.
I can bring some good news for us on this, in that I saw Therese Coffey just before we came on air, and she does actually want to come on the programme and hear from listeners, and I know from various phone-ins we've done, Theo, that this is a really big issue for a lot of people, and it doesn't get the coverage that it merits.
No, and Conservative MPs, people like, I'm thinking of Steve Baker, have talked about their inboxes and mailbags being full of people worried about what happens now with this, as you say, it was introduced at the start of the pandemic, this £20 uplift in universal credit each week, and that being taken away. Interesting, I thought, the Prime Minister's line this morning, especially when he was on LBC this morning, and he was making the argument that he didn't want to have to pay to continue that uplift in universal credit through higher taxes, and the hope is, and of course this feeds into the Number 10's narrative about the economy, is that the government should be transitioning the UK economy from low-skilled, low wages to a higher skilled and higher wage economy. But of course, as the caller mentions, if you're on disability benefit and you cannot work, that raises huge questions, and that's why Simon, of course, has referred to those funds which are available through councils or otherwise.
Ems.
I just say I think that it's been mentioned time and time again at various fringes that we are living in exceptional times. I think that the general public, at least I would hope, and I think my understanding is that everyone is being very understanding of the fact that these are not normal decisions that need to be taken. But that doesn't mean that the next decisions need to be framed in that narrative. And I think that's something that potentially hasn't been articulated from the current government, but is definitely in the decision-making process.
It is interesting that I think on every programme, I'm looking at my producer Robbie, I think over the last 2 weeks, on every cross question, we've had a question on the universal credit, cut in inverted commas. It is a cut, even though it was only meant to be a temporary increase. Simon, what do you hear from your constituents on this?
Yeah, I think Theo's right. I mean, I've had a number of people have contacted me, in some cases just wanting clarity, just wanting to understand what else is available, and what level of support is available for their particular circumstances. Other people who've got just a view on the policy, and whether it should be continued or otherwise. But every single MP that you will speak to from any party will all be reporting that this is issued. Therese Coffey, as you mentioned, is very, very aware of this. And as I said in my previous answer, I don't pretend for a minute that we will be able to have a perfect solution for every single person. But the intention is that where there are people who fall outside the whole range of provisions we'll have, please, make sure that every avenue is exhausted. We are here, to use that awful expression, we are here to help. And I hope COVID has reassured people that when we say we're here to help, we really actually do mean it.
Do you remember that quote from Ronald Reagan, the most frightening words in the English language? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yes, we have our sort of whip's office equivalent.
I'm from the civil service and I'm here to help.
Well, we have re-established contact with Swansea, you'll be pleased to hear. Dean, who's a regular contributor, says coming through loud and clear here in Swansea, and we are going to go back to Kerry in Swansea in just a moment. It's coming up to 8:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player.
Right, Mr. Boris Johnson, have you got 100% of your staff back behind their desks?
No, I don't.
What's your percentage? I've got 100% back at LBC. What have you got?
Well, I congratulate.
But some people try to get to work and they can't because there are people stuck to the road with banners and posters and come on, Boris Johnson, you've got to sort this out.
That is insane. And look, I mean, there are some people, Nick, who call those individuals legitimate protesters.
Are they?
They're not. I think they're irresponsible crusties who are basically trying to stop people going about their day's work.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With the British Airways American Express Accelerating Business Card. Check out the world.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:48. Simon Hart, Theo Usherwood and Ems Barr with us taking your calls. Kerry in Swansea is on the line, I hope. Hello, Kerry.
Hi, Ian. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'd like to ask the panel about levelling up, specifically replacement EU funding, which was targeted at the poorest parts of the UK. If I could just use Wales as a quick example, we're £375 million worse off each year. And whilst the UK government has announced and opened the Community Renewal Fund, but hasn't made any awards of funding, even though it should have done in July, it hasn't said anything about the Shared Prosperity Fund, which will deal with the majority of replacement EU funding, and that's 18 months after we've left the EU. So, yeah, I'd like to get their take on that, please.
Well, Simon, I think you probably know a bit more about this than anyone else here at the moment. I could be wrong, but I suspect you do.
Well, I'll have a stab. I refute the initial claim that Wales is £375 million worse off. The commitment, which of course everything is up in the air to some extent as a result of COVID, but the commitment was to not a penny less. That was what the manifesto said as far as replacement funding, so that the funding going into Wales should be no less than that which has been going in courtesy of EU funding for the duration of this Parliament. In fact, this year it is more, and we don't hear quite so much about that. Shared Prosperity Fund is due for an airing in the spending review in a few weeks' time, end of October, beginning of November. And the other funding, and isn't it good news that we're talking about lots of funding coming into Wales, by the way, levelling up and community renewal funds. Yes, there is a delay, you're absolutely right, or the caller is absolutely right on the one particular funding, but that should also be announced in a matter of weeks. So what we're looking at, I hope, is the proper dictionary definition of levelling up, at least as much as, if not more, money going into the parts of Wales which needs it. And the expression I sometimes use to describe this, it's about making sure that people's life chances to be, to coin a phrase, are as equal in Pembroke as they are in Peterborough.
Ems, we'll widen this out from the specifics there. You might be relieved to hear. But the levelling up agenda, Ben Kentish, my colleague, has been talking to people at the conference and just asking them, sticking a microphone under their nose and saying, what does levelling up mean to you? And they all give a different answer. Now, it's a phrase that the government is using all over the place, but people still don't seem to know what it means.
I think that's slightly unfair on this government because, to keep the house with the greenhouse is greener or whatever it was. There've always been slogans, but the essence of it is that your life chances should be defined by the talent that you have and where you want to be. And I think that to try and sum it up in a slogan is very, very difficult and also, to be honest, impossible. And to criticise that slogan is very, very easy, but the essence of the ambition is incredibly important.
But they've actually named a government department, the Department for Levelling Up. I mean, you've worked in government. It's preposterous, isn't it?
Oh, well, I think that would be for others to comment on.
Something that's integral about Boris Johnson and the way he's run this government so far is that he took the mandate from the 2019 election and he's literally taken the whole thing from that election into government. And something that political journalists like myself have been unaccustomed to is to have a prime minister or a government that is completely focused on what it was promising in an election manifesto. Okay, people, obviously governments look at manifestos and they measure themselves against manifestos, but this government has taken it to another level in trying to always revert back to why those voters, particularly in those red wall seats, voted blue last time. Now, there is, of course, a danger that this slogan, levelling up, turns into the same as Brexit means Brexit, and everybody goes, what does Brexit mean? So we don't have anything to define it against. But ultimately, I think, from speaking to members here, and I think what will happen in the country, is that Boris Johnson won't be necessarily judged on targets. He won't necessarily be judged on whether he has opened so many schools or employed so many more teachers or so many more doctors or nurses. He will be ultimately judged on what voters think and what voters feel has happened over the course of this Parliament. And if he gets it right, then he'll keep those red wall seats. If he gets it wrong, then the Conservatives will be in trouble at the next election. And ultimately, I think actually the slogans or the phrases don't necessarily matter. It's what those voters think in those key seats when it comes to the next election.
Simon, you wanted to come.
Well, only that I think levelling up isn't actually a particularly complicated concept. And Rishi Sunak and the PM have made their comments pretty clear right from the start. This is about making sure that everybody has, as far as it is possible, an equal chance of a job and a livelihood and success in their lives. In fact, if that means that areas which have been hitherto perhaps left behind, they're going to get a greater share of what we're able to invest in jobs and livelihoods. That's not complicated, that message. That's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Kerry, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I would. I completely refute what Simon Hart said about Wales being better off without replacement EU funding. We have not received the 300, just under £400 million per year that we should have done. And as a result of us not receiving that, we are looking at cutting apprenticeship.
Well, you say you're incorrect.
It sounds remarkably well informed.
I'm sorry, I think I know. And how much have we received from the UK government this year under the Levelling Up Fund and under the Community Renewal Fund?
Well, there's, as I just said, the announcement about a community renewal fund is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. But the actual value of these funds is, as we've made absolutely clear from the start, runs to the hundreds of millions. But as I said, it'll be £402 million this year, which is in excess of the 5-year average. And so the suggestion that Wales has been underfunded on that is simply untrue.
The fact is, we're looking at having to cut apprenticeships. So we're talking about this is how you level up. It's by improving skills, young people.
Well, the apprenticeship scheme is Welsh government. The apprenticeship scheme is Welsh government. So if you've got a concern about that, I really think that is something which Mark Drakeford will have to answer.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Kerry, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's go to Tony in Doncaster. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Ian. Every time there's a conference season, the political correspondents will always refer to the metropolitan elite. And they'll say things like, this policy will cause, over the dinner table conversations about it amongst the metropolitan elite. This will appeal to the metropolitan elite. Who are the metropolitan elite?
James O'Brien, I would have said, but Theo,
I couldn't possibly expand. I think
he knows I mean it lovingly.
Yes, Tony. I think there is obviously and this is something that Boris Johnson, of course, and the government. There was a divide in the Brexit referendum, and I think Brexit was one of those going into that general election back in 2019. There was one of that divide that people felt that in, and this is a narrative that I remember from particularly before that election, that there was this overarching establishment that wanted to keep us in the European Union or keep us as closely tied to the European Union as possible. It is no accident that, of course, the Vote Leave message was take back control, and that was something that Dominic Cummings, who of course went into number 10 as effectively, though he didn't quite get the title, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, was hammering home throughout that election. That was very similar to the messaging during the 2016 Brexit referendum, and that is one of the reasons why, although never particularly defined, Boris Johnson was very successful at winning over parts of the country that hadn't ever looked at the Conservative Party as an option for somebody who they could govern, because Boris Johnson was somebody who was prepared to say, actually, we want your support and we're prepared to govern for you, against whether it's the Supreme Court who ruled against prorogation, whether it's against the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, who was of course a Tory, against the Labour Party, who was trying to, and this was the narrative that was portrayed at every turn, Liberal Democrats every turn, trying to stop Brexit from happening. And that's why people have come to term, and it hasn't really been mentioned at this conference, the term metropolitan elite.
Ems, are you part of the metropolitan elite?
Oh gosh, honestly, I wish. I think the metropolitan elite is a term that's been used as a very easy vehicle to criticise people that you disagree with without actually talking about what they're saying. It's very easy to dismiss someone by a stereotype rather than talking about the arguments they're making. And I think this is an incredibly good example of that. I have no idea what the metropolitan elite is. I think it means a different thing to each individual person. I mean, we're all basically using it to dismiss an argument that we disagree with.
Well, as a former head of the Countryside Alliance, Simon, you are the antithesis of the metropolitan elite, I would say.
Metropolitan, but I weirdly, and I'm going to change my mind on what I was going to say, but when I don't know what the metropolitan elite is either. I've never sort of met anybody who says, hi, I'm from the metropolitan elite. But what I think of when I create an image in my head of that, it's probably Sir Keir Starmer at a Islington dinner party.
Couldn't possibly comment.
Turn
Right.
off my microphone, I'm laughing too much.
Where are you from, Ems, originally?
London.
Yes, so you are definitely metropolitan. Theo Usherwood, you're metropolitan elite, aren't you?
East London.
East, yeah. Actually, I'm not sure East London doesn't qualify, really, does it? There we are. Right, Julian Twickenham says, Russia has taken the lead in a space race with a difference, sending a team to the International Space Station to shoot a feature film ahead of an American crew. Which film star would you send to space, Simon Hart?
Oh, blimey, that's a really tricky one. Well, I suppose, and he won't thank me for saying this, but I think Michael Sheen might be quite an amusing addition to any space mission. Not that I do want him to come back, by the way. I hope this isn't a one-way trip.
I think it is a one-way trip. That's what.
In that case, I take it back. And Michael, if you're listening, I apologise for that. I just thought you'd liven things up.
He is Welsh, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, absolutely. One of a great line. I want him to come back.
I think he lionised Tony Blair, didn't he?
He did.
He did. Yeah.
Theo?
How do I do it without expressing an opinion, Ian?
You can't. This is something you can express an opinion on.
A film star.
Benedict Cumberbatch, I'd say. I find him intensely irritating. Ems?
James Blunt.
James Blunt. He's not a film star, he's a singer, but he's a very good singer. I love his songs.
Well, technically he's a celebrity.
I suppose so. Thank you very much indeed, Theo Usherwood, Ems Barr and Simon Hart. We have another cross question tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. We'll be back in London for that. In a moment, we're going to be discussing misogyny and whether it should be a hate crime. Boris Johnson thinks not, but I want to test out the arguments for and against. If you have an opinion on that, the number to call 0345 6060 973. It's 9:01.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the Home Secretary has confirmed there'll be an independent inquiry into the